A very warm welcome to the Cloud Council. I am Andy Friedlander. This is the #1 destination if you would like to know about digital transformation, all things technical, and learn from business leaders who have been there and done that in the information technology world. We have got a double header today. Two gentlemen who have literally written a book on digital transformation. It's called Transformation Sprint, and we will distill the best bits in the next few episodes so you can take them into your organizations wherever you are. For fun, we call them Ant and Tech. See what we did there, but their real names, and please welcome Finn Golding and Hayden Shaughnessy. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you both?
Doing great, thank you.
Yeah, great.
Good. It's a big intro, so feel free to answer any question at any time. And I know you both have specialities, but perhaps you could just start. Finn, you're more of the technologist, I guess. Hayden, more of a kind of business strategist. Can you just give us a bit of a flavour of the kind of moment you recognized each other in the room or in the environment and you realized that there were complementary skills that you both had?
Well, maybe I can start as Tech, not Ant. It was a few years back when I worked at Paddy Power as a CTO. I'd been in my career in a lot of big companies like financial services, doing large scale systems, etc. But as I moved to dot-coms, I got more into IT agility and delivering at pace. And I had a kind of a quirky style of leadership, agile leadership, quirky office that looked like a little football stadium. And Hayden, I'd actually seen some of the stuff I'd been writing about and presenting about, and came to see me in Dublin with some clients of his. Maybe you want to take it from there, Hayden.
Sure. So why would I be looking for something? A lot of my background is in how new technology or new platforms affect the way businesses function. We tend to think about those things in terms of their impact on a business model. And over the past 20 years, everybody's been talking about business model innovation. Perhaps I've always been more interested in the process model or the operating model of the firm. And as I was looking around on behalf of a major UK bank to try and find examples of how companies were functioning much more efficiently, I came across Finn's work at Paddy Power. And Paddy Power at that stage were one of the first to adopt DevOps. They were already doing 50 updates a day to their products. And it was the kind of thing that, it was a pretty good metric. You're looking at banks that hadn't done an update in a year or were doing 18-month cycles. So I took a group of banking executives over to Paddy Power and we sat and talked for a day. You can say a bit more about that from your perspective, these bankers walking into that little stadium you have down the back of the office there.
Yeah, I mean, we're all very quirky there, but to see these guys coming over in their suits, their pinstripe suits, and sitting on the fake grass in my office, which literally was like that, was I think it's surreal for them. But at the same time, you couldn't really ignore what we were doing in terms of delivering at this sort of pace, and a team that was highly engaged and having fun. And I think we may have made a bit of fun of the execs as well behind the backs, but we won't talk about that now.
But that's perhaps, Finn, the rebel in you. But in reality, there's a combination. Both of you had extensive blue chip world experience, but the highlight there of the Paddy Power situation is you have this almost upstart brand who are dealing with massive amounts of data that they constantly need to refresh and I suppose bring new algorithms to the fore. Meanwhile, the legacy of traditional banking who are trying to adapt to these retail models. I mean, was there once your clients left the environment, was there an immediate realization that the similarities were there, or was it an obvious, just a cultural shift, everything else was similar?
I think maybe Hayden can answer that question a bit better than me, but I mean, I always felt that what we were doing was normal, shall we say, and just because we were able to look at the way that we built systems or delivered systems and looked at where there was waste or there was friction, remove those things and deliver at speed. And part of that was cloud. And so having, cloud instances where we were able to just spin up whenever we needed the capacity, because you're right, we were doing 7 million price updates on a Saturday afternoon during football. And that kind of scale and that kind of speed needed to have the technology that was as quick as possible. But I don't know, what did the bankers think, Hayden?
Well, I think actually there are many more interesting features of what you were doing as well. I mean, one is that those brokers on your side were creating new products by the minute, pushing out new types of bets. It made not a jot of difference to the bankers. They went back to their bank and they did nothing with that information. And I think that's the point at which we began to feel a connection, because you see that so often. You see so often the examples of really, really good companies, the examples of, say, for example, in customer centricity, what Amazon does really, really makes you a winner. Why does nobody else do it? And this was the same. Here was a company which was showing you 7 million price changes in a Saturday afternoon, all kinds of different products being launched. I mean, hundreds of products being launched in a day. Why doesn't this other company do it? Why didn't that bank do it? And we started to scratch our heads a bit around that one. And basically, that's what we've been thinking about ever since, and exploring all the reasons why not, and came up eventually with Transformation Sprint as a way of saying, you can really do this. It doesn't need to be very complex. It can be done in 6 simple steps inside 4 weeks.
But you mentioned companies like Amazon, or personalization of betting systems, so everybody feels they have ownership or at least agency within that environment. You used an example, I think, about a broken plate you received where Amazon pretty much refunded you in a matter of hours because they already knew exactly who you were, even though obviously they have billions of customers worldwide. Does that appeal to you personally, that you like the idea of personalization, or do you think it's a necessary business function now?
I don't think it's personalization. I think it's categorization. I fall into one of those categories of people that spend a lot. I'm a Prime member, and if I say that something's gone wrong, it's gone wrong. And it wasn't resolved in hours, it was resolved in minutes. And the feeling you get as a customer, not having to go and take that photograph, not having to argue with customer service personnel, just getting your problem dealt with immediately, makes me a very, very loyal customer. I guess that plate cost about 12 quid. What would it cost to process a refund for 12 quid? You know, if you wanted to go through customer services, 100 quid, it's not worth it. You may as well make me happy and save yourself money.
This is the first time we've ever done it in tandem, but this is a chance for Finn and for Hayden to answer binary questions. So Finn, if you answer first, Hayden straight away afterwards. Binary questions: marathon or sprint?
Marathon.
Sprint.
Saver or spender?
Saver.
Spender.
Sunday roast or cheese on toast?
Cheese on toast.
Sunday roast.
Bunch of mates or bunch of flowers?
Bunch of flowers.
Yeah, a bunch of flowers.
Tesla man or camper van?
More of a bike man. So neither of them.
Definitely a camper van.
Camper for you. Netflix or cinema? We're nearly finished after this.
Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix. Same again.
Okay, this is a leading question. Joy Division or One Direction?
Joy Division, all the way.
I know nothing about either, unfortunately.
Okay, your answer to this one finally. Late nights or early mornings?
Early mornings.
Both at the same time.
Look at that. Thank you, gents, for answering your binary questions. So both of you, and Finn, I'd like to ask about a little about your background. You came from banking, and you work with some of the big payment organizations. And I know, Hayden, with Swift and some of the other organizations with trans-border transactions going on. When you were at Paddy Power and you saw these guys come in, did you see it as an opportunity? Were you reserved about their ability to change the culture?
I think it was more of a flashback because, as you say, I worked in large scale systems in financial services, so NatWest, RBS, Visa, companies like that. And I was also working in the US, you know, in terms of really huge payment system scale. I switched to lastminute.com before Paddy Power, so I got used to that kind of being surgically removed from my suit and actually becoming part of the team itself, you know, actually sitting with the team members and not in a corner office, you know. And I learned a lot in terms of e-commerce and delivering at pace and camaraderie and being in a startup and all that sort of stuff. So going to Paddy Power was very similar, as you say. We were like exponential growth, great fun. You know, everything we did, we would look at it and say, does this make sense to the customer? Does it make sense to us as an organization? Let's do it. And the banking guys coming along, they're perfectly nice guys, but it just reminded me of the friction you see in large organizations. So like, for instance, to implement DevOps, you have to change the org structure, and senior leaders don't like that. To do continuous delivery, the security teams don't like that. And when you're doing cloud, some security teams don't like that either. And so we never thought about those things. We thought about, okay, can we use this? And how can we do it in a way that's safe and secure? But at the same time, we weren't fighting ourselves. We were looking at, we're fighting the puzzle rather than the internal politics, shall we say.
I think it's interesting, and I'm moving on from the banking, but you've both highlighted, in one sense, the kind of casual jumper and open shirt mindset of what we know to be the modern startup, and then the traditional suit wearing old school banks. Now, as they've come together, the resistance used to be about what you wear. Now there's a lot of resistance about change. I wondered if you can maybe just expand on what some of those things are, because our viewers would recognize some of these inside their own companies.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe I'll let Hayden talk about some of those resistance to change, but I would just say one thing about that startup and suit thing is that, even the companies that large companies that start to mimic that style, with the foosball and the free food and all the rest of it, it kind of fails, because those things are not necessarily what makes an organization agile. But anyway, Hayden, what do you think?
Well, I think there's a business IT divide that's now very deeply entrenched in most organizations. And thinking about those banks, I guess the suit and the other dress sense is reflecting something. Not quite sure what it reflects actually, but what I found with those organizations is that there was an inability on the part of the business to set a strategy that took advantage of what technology was offering. On the IT side, there is an inability to inform the business about what's really possible. And because the dialogue between those two is often very poor enough to be mistrustful, it's hard to make progress on that. You find different types of initiatives, different types of innovations, if you like, where people like agile, new ways of work, where some of it seems to be helpful. But look at something like Lean Startup, which gave us the MVP. Every organization now doesn't talk about prototypes, it talks about MVPs. MVP is a source of more distrust. And it was happening in that organization where IT was saying, well, we'll spin up an MVP for you on that. Business was saying, you do not do minimum anything. So that for those who don't know, minimum viable product, MVP, business felt it was being offered a minimal solution because IT was not cooperative. So a lot of the things that we do, a lot of the language that we use, a lot of the legacy, a lot of the history intensifies this distrust. And that's what we've got to get beyond. And that's what we've been trying to do in our work. From the moment we got together, really, that's what we feel we are. We are business and IT, and we have a constant dialogue where Finn enlightens me about how IT thinks, keeps some secrets, I'm sure. I try and enlighten him about how business thinks.
I think any business, private sector, public sector, will be viewing this with an absolute sense that that's where we are. This is not some hypothetical future. Where we are right now is enlightened CEOs are looking at the IT not as a function, but as almost a key driver of the business, not just in retail. And I suppose once you can overcome some of that resistance, do you then find that there are almost a first barrier once you've got through the mindset shift of how to now start this process? CEO goes, great, let's do it. What's then the next resistance?
I think partly the CEOs are a bit nervous about radical change, big change, big scale change, big transformation, because it's expensive. It takes a long time and it's littered with failure. The team that works for the CEO might be themselves trying to, control their kind of like their silos or their hierarchies. And then you've got IT that have got a whole bunch of agile practices now, which seem almost like a different language in the business. So we see this as organizations, in fact, even in public sector, we've done some work there, where you've got IT moving at one pace and the business working in yearly cycles at another, and they don't necessarily have a language or a set of tools or processes to intersect with them. Because I always say that agile is a thing you are, not a thing you buy. But in IT, it's a thing you buy at the moment.
I don't think that many CEOs really do know how to take advantage of the technology that they have on offer. And I think that very often in business, we relabel stuff or rebadge stuff instead of actually changing. I'll give you an example of that. The CEO of Barclays Bank attended the MIT Platform Summit and announced that Barclays was now a platform company. It's anything but a platform company, but it pays to be called a platform company because CEOs need big initiatives. Actually, what that CEO could be doing is looking much more closely at what something like the cloud has to offer as a way around the business IT divide. We know from experience that the majority of companies lift and shift into the cloud, and not enough of them start to strategize around how does this actually make me more customer centric. Instead of really thinking that through, they'll say something like, we need a data centric strategy, or we need a new data strategy and a single view of the customer strategy. And they'll push innovation, progress, and value 4 years down the line in order to pursue this big initiative. Whereas you could, in the space of 6 to 8 weeks, do something really, really valuable to prove out the value of a new way of dealing with your company through the cloud. That's part of the problem. You know, we relabel, we rebadge, we make claims, but we don't strategize enough, and we don't have enough executives being trained in the kind of strategic thinking it takes when you've got cloud coming along, IoT coming along, and AI, ML coming along, Agile coming along, all these new things you can do. They're not actually being transmitted into the executive suite as a new skill set there.
So if we can just very briefly bust some of the myths. I know in another episode we're going to talk in more depth about your playbook, everything you've just described about how to move forward with the Lighthouse project mindset, shining the light, small victories, quick sprints, and I know want to get deep into that. But busting some of the myths, is there anything that people can take away from this episode that maybe tomorrow they can go to their C-suite or board meeting and say, look, this is a good rationale for doing what I'm proposing?
I think we'll cover that, as you say. I think some of the techniques that we use within organizations, anybody could use. And in fact, our first book's called Flow, and that was really for change makers and mavericks. As you call me, I'm a maverick techniques for getting the senior organization involved in what we're doing from a technology perspective. But we just visualize all the work that's currently in play, all the projects that are ongoing at the moment, every single thing, and stuck them on the wall. And then we took the CEO of the C-suite through all this, and they couldn't believe 300 or 400 projects on the wall. What is it that we're doing? And there's so much waste in that portfolio. And the CEOs never saw it because it was too much detail in a report. But when you physically see it, they say, wow, we've got to do something about this and cut it down to focus on the most important things for our business.
Again, looking at that from the business side rather than project side, if you're a CEO or in the executive suite today, what you really need to do is figure out how you're going to enhance and improve your operating model design skills. Typically, what you will have focused on are things like your business model. You'd be thinking about recurring revenues or microtransactions and things of that nature. They have repercussions on your operating model, but nobody's out there teaching operating model design skills. We do that in Transformation Sprint. But what you really need to be thinking about is, how do I acquire the skills that allow me to design and redesign my operating model on a continuous basis? Quick example of that from the 1990s. We were obsessed in the 1990s with business process reengineering. It was hugely successful and companies skilled up in BPR very, very quickly. We now need to do the same again with a much more heterogeneous set of process changes that need to be made.
Brilliant. Now, I know we're going to, as I said, tackle in another episode something in a bit more depth. So if you'd like to join us, you know exactly where to click to see more of Finn and a little more of Hayden. We're going to unwrap their book, Transformation Sprint. We hope to see you.